Welcome to episode 155 of the Grip Strip podcast. To put some respect on this edition of the Grip Strip podcast, my name is Philip Matthew. I'm your host, and I'm here with former iRacing Indy 500 champion, gentleman and a scholar. His name is Joshua Fine. What's going on, man?
Hey, I'm doing great, Phil. And yeah, put some respect on my name. Put some respect on your name. Put respect on this podcast name. No, it's been good. And yeah, put some respect on Martin Truex's name because he's back after being winless. And now he goes out and wins the Clash. So maybe he's going to win the championship this year like Joey Logano did last year. So we'll see. But racing's back. We have football with the Super Bowl this week. But other than that, it's all racing from here on out. The rest of until September when football comes back, but there'll still be racing until November, of course.
Absolutely. Busch Clash at the Coliseum took place yesterday. The main event seemed to take a long time, or at least the second half of the main event, which saw that Truax kid from Mayetta, New Jersey, or whichever hometown he's from that particular day, win the Clash for the first time in his career, and win for the first time since 2020, I think. So that was a big deal for him. Good momentum. There was a lot of drivers that were up front during the day or during the evening. Martin Truex, of course, was one of the fastest cars during the entire event. So it probably was likely that he was going to end up pulling it off, and he did. Um, we'll get in all the happenings and action that took place. A lot of news that's come out today for along different drivers and passing of a matriarch of one of the great families in NASCAR. There was news from two of the best drivers currently, or have been two of the best drivers of this whatever generation of the last 20 years. Made some announcements. So we'll get into all that NASCAR wise. We got 2 weeks before or less than it was like probably a week away from we take this week off next what is it Tuesday or Wednesday they'll be back on the track for qualifying or Wednesday night to qualify for the Daytona 500. The duels will be on Thursday night. They do not have a practice, which is idiotic, but it's NASCAR for you. We'll talk about the Super Bowl. Pro Bowl games was interesting. Certain things were there, but nothing of great significance. Pro Bowl probably needs another reevaluation after whatever they wanted to call that. Seemed like the guys enjoyed it. There's a lot of fun, a lot of but no major injuries, so that's a positive there. Nothing really in the coaching realm, I don't think off the top, but we'll check into that as well. Some the free agent stuff and whatever probably will be coming in the next few weeks. We'll give our picks or thoughts for the Super Bowl, which involves Kermit the Frog and the Eagles. Then we'll get into the news. Of course, I mentioned with all the NASCAR news, there's stuff on IndyCar, Formula One, the launch of the Williams for this year. So with Logan Sargent making his Formula One debut this year, first American driver full time since Scott Speed, first American driver to be on the grid since Alexander Rossi, and that was back in what 2014 or 2015, something like that. Yeah, so it's been a while. There's different things going on in all these racing series. Time for all of them. Red Bull launched, and it might have been one of the most boring car launches or awful car launches I've ever seen in the history of motorsports or history of sport. But big news on that end for who their partner is going to be for their power unit starting in 2026. And we'll get in all that. And on top of it, we'll get into the GSP roundup. Formula E. will be racing in Hyderabad in India. First race in India since I think it's a World Superbike event there at the old Bud circuit, which I have this I don't know if I think it's either there or it was at Malaysia where Nicky Hayden won his last race of his career and when he um, moved to World Superbike and so I'm might be mistaken but I'll check that out and then we'll get into what is it? We have Rally Sweden. And that's about all there is this coming week for the racing. Will definitely be more in the upcoming weeks, and then Josh will do a sim segment, and we'll close the deal. So yeah, we had the Busch Clash at the Coliseum. Wiz Khalifa was stoned and gave one of the weirdest interviews I've ever seen in my life. I thought it was a Marshawn Lynch interview. Shannon Spake didn't really know what to do. It was kind of funny that way. Joel McHale was being Joel McHale, and for better or worse, Cypress Hill went out there and brought it back to the '90s, and the I think Jeff Gluck was really enjoying Cypress Hill because what's his name from I'm forgetting his name on one of the websites. Jerry Jordan was videotaping him dancing, so I'm like, "Where are you?" And I tweeted him. I'm like, "So where's everybody else in the media center dancing? If you're taping Gluck, you might as well go and give equal time." But there was racing too that took place, and as I mentioned, Martin Truex Jr. was the winner. He started second after winning his heat. Led one time, led the last 25 laps of the race. Ryan Priest, there was 5 leaders. Bubba Wallace led or Brian Priest led the most laps in his debut in the 41 car for Stewart Haas Racing. Bubba Wallace led the second most laps with 40, Priest 43, Bubba Wallace with 40, and Denny Hamlin had 26. Eric Almirola started on pole. There was one of after one of the cautions, he the communication broke down and he didn't know that it was a choose. Somehow or another chose the outside, and basically that was the end of his night. The top, we'll get into the top 10. Martin Truex Jr., Bald Spot Dylan, Kyle Busch. So the RCR guys finished second and third. Alex Bowman fourth. Kyle Larson fifth. Tyler Reddick sixth. Priest seventh. Ross Chastain eighth after another incident with Dennis Hamlin, who finished ninth. And Will Byron finished 10th. So I think that's three or yeah, it's 48, the 5. Yeah, they're 3 of the Hendrick cars finished in the top 10, both RCR cars, 1 car from, Trackhouse. The only non-Chevys were Truex, or, Reddick, Priest, Hamlin. So that's 4, yeah, that's 4. 6 Chevys and 4 outside. Only 1 Ford made it in the top 10. So that was, and I mean, we'll get into some of the other people that were in there and in the race behind that, and might have had a chance with some things falling their way. But 16 caution flags, none of the laps counted, so it made it even longer. And it seemed like every caution flag was like 6 laps. So you take it for what it is. I would have been they would have run at least I think they would have run 2/3 of the race under yellow the way that these guys ran over each other, Josh. Truex had a fast race car, qualified well, and he had he put himself in a position to win his heat, and he did. He had qualified. Um, he qualified well, and in turn utilized that advantage to go and advance. And that's just the starting lineup. I wanted to see the actual there you go. Yeah, so practice, he was the fastest car in practice. Bubba Wallace had the fastest 10 lap average during practice on Saturday. And, 10 lap average, Bubba Wallace, Chase Briscoe, Truex, Blaney, Todd Gilliland, Hamlin, Almirola, Kyle Busch, Ross Chastain, Christopher Bell. So there's Fords. There were a few Fords up there that could have had a chance, but a lot of them got wrecked. And Justin Haley had actually qualified on pole for the race itself, and he was on pole for the race. One, Kyle Busch, Christopher Bell, Will Byron, Eric Almirola, Austin Dillon, Denny Hamlin, AJ Allmendinger, Alex Bowman, Kyle Larson. Martin Truex Jr. was actually qualified 22nd, but he was able to move up and make something happen. Ended up finishing first in the second heat, and took advantage of that to win the race, Josh. So I mean, MTJ, a lot of stuff going on personally for him, but he went out there yesterday and ended up dominating that last part of the race, and has given himself a nice bit of momentum heading into the Daytona 500, a race that has eluded him in the past, getting beaten at the line by Denny Hamlin. What is it, 7 years ago, I believe, or eight? Yeah, something like that. 7 or 8 years ago. I'm forgetting which one, but Truex gets a win. James Small goes and gets a positive start to the year after what was a rough ending of the regular season for them last year, being top five in points and then ending up finishing 17th. But Truex had a piece yesterday and all weekend, and he brought it home when it counted.
Yeah, I mean, Truex was pretty fast throughout the entire weekend of racing there. He had a good qualifying session, and then his heat race. Obviously, like you said, he won, and he was up there the entire night. Maintained himself inside the top five, and when it came uh, to the time to get the lead, he was able to go get the lead, and it just seemed like whoever was going to be in the lead, whether it was Truex, Bubba Wallace, uh, Eric Almirola, Ryan Preece, whether it was one of those four or anybody else, you could guarantee that they were probably going to be there at the end, as long as nothing happened to them. And I mean, to some of those guys, something did happen, but then Truex was able to pull away at the end and just not have anything happen to him there. Because for the other guys like Bubba Wallace, like he got shuffled out of the lead, maintained in the top five, and then ended up getting spun out by Austin Dillon. But he had already lost the lead by that point. Priest, he had this issue happen to him, and electrical or something like that, and just dropped off the pace for a bit. Still finished in seventh, but he lost the lead and everything. Denny was up there too. Denny, of course, he got booted out of the way by Bo Wallace actually on one of the restarts, and he was able to still finish top 10. But again, once you lose the lead, it's really hard to get it back, especially at this track. And then Eric Almirola, like you said, just the miscommunication there, and he ended up at one point was fighting to stay on the lead lap, but Wallace catching up to him there, in the middle of a green flag run. So there's a lot of interesting racing going on. I mean, I don't know if you want to call it racing, given the fact that I think average green flag run was about 3 laps. So just a lot of carnage going around, and the 16 cautions, and like you said, and the fact that it's a quarter mile and everything, and this race is only 37 and a half miles distance wise. So there's really not a whole lot of distance yet. You have cars that ran out of gas because I guess as a penalty for being in the last chance qualifier, you can't refill your car before the race. So I guess it makes sense in a way. And you're basically gambling on the fact if you're in the last chance qualifier, you make it in, then you're gambling on the fact that it's not going to run too long, and well, it ended up doing because everybody was running into each other and being super aggressive. So that was why, of course, Todd Gilliland and Michael McDowell ran out of gas in the middle of it, and one of those was a caution, I think, with McDowell slowing down and everything. So yeah, just a lot of aggressive racing there. It seemed like you really had to lay it into a guy to get him out of the way to pass him. If you couldn't get around him cleanly. And then, I think they also mentioned on the broadcast, with the Gen 6 car, the grip levels and everything, just with the larger tires. And all that stuff, just you really had to bump a guy out of the way and put a lot of force into it to be able to move him out of the way and pass. And then some of those moves, you saw guys getting bumped out of the way 4 cars back, and the energy from that propelling into whoever was up front and spinning that car out, like we saw with Ryan Blaney getting spun out in the middle of it, from 4 cars back, which is crazy, but yeah, that's how they're driving and everything. So you saw that, you saw veteran moves like with Harvick and Elliott and Ricky Stenhouse, the end of that their heat race. Stenhouse and Chase getting into it, and then Harvick coming out on the other side, qualifying for the main event. So, you saw a little bit of everything there throughout that, but it also, showed the level of aggressiveness that these drivers have right now. But then also, it was a little bit of a test with the new changes that they made to the car for 2023. With last year's issues with the bumper, still came around though. We've heard comments from Chris Bell talked about it before the event, and Bubba Wallace talked about it afterwards. That still seems like impacts to the rear still seem pretty violent. According to Kyle Larson, saying it was pretty violent inside the car, and you know, headaches or whatever, backs, whatever injury or not injury, but back soreness, whatever. So that's something to look out for. So not sure how NASCAR is going to have to adjust to that if they need to make any changes. I mean, it's pretty late in the game to be doing that, but now we know that stuff is out there, and we'll see how much of an impact that will be on the larger tracks, if that helps anything with rearward impacts or anything like that. So, um, just a I think microcosm of what you might be able to expect this year in the season. I think for Toyota, it seems like Truex might be back this year. We'll see. I think Bubba Wallace, he had good speed throughout the event. Tyler Reddick, he was up there as well. Denny, of course, always trying to be up there. I think Kyle Busch showed what he's going to be able to do in the 8 car this year for RCR. Regardless of his legal situation or whatever, he seems like he's going to be up front a lot. I think the Fords, especially with SHR, they kind of had a little bit of a down year last year, and I think it's going to be better for them, especially with Priest, even Eric Almirola to an extent. Yeah, I think they have a chance to be really good this year. So, we'll see, what they're able to do. On the other end, Penske, with Logano, Blaney, and Austin Cindric, they didn't really show much, but we'll see what it looks like for Ford this year, with maybe changing of hands with SHR making some gains or whatnot. But um, yeah, I think should look like what the year is going to be looking like this year, and I think there's going to be a lot of players throughout the year, and I think with the way things are with the next gen car, I think we're going to see a lot of aggressive racing, and I think with especially with teams figuring out this car from last year to this year, maybe getting even more aggressive to try to make things happen, because it looks like these cars are going to be really planted to the ground this year. So we'll see what happens, but you know really I mean, depending on how you want to look at it, entertaining or not entertaining way to start the season.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, with a lot of these drivers having complaints, the lack of give in the bumpers, not really having to pay the price for nailing somebody in the front or the rear, really. The grills, the front noses held up pretty well too. Back if you did that with a Gen 6 or Gen 5, you're doing in a radiator, you're gonna knock something else off. In this case, you're just going and slam drafting, which I think it speaks to the way everybody drove in that race. And I think it was Kyle Busch who said it, prior to everybody finding out with his gun crap, but that nobody had respect for each other. And I think with some of the news that has come out, or at least one particular news piece that has come out from yesterday, it might explain why that is taking place. You look at from yesteryear and the respect and kind of the code that existed amongst drivers, and that if you didn't follow the code, somebody was either going to teach you by wrecking you, or they were going to take you aside and they were going to tell you how it's supposed to be. Now I don't think that exists anymore, and you can tell it in the racing. You can tell it in the way they drive into and over each other, and it's part of what makes the super speedway races even worse. It's not like super speedway racing is exactly the way to go and identify great racing or identify the best driver, but when you're just sitting there and running into somebody and waiting for them to wreck, I don't think that's racing. Well, that wasn't a racing yesterday. That was just an overrated bumper car demo derby. Um, and fine, good. It's an exhibition race. I don't think there was. I'm not going to say, oh, we need to take it back to Daytona. No, absolutely not. I don't care. That's fine. Don't need to be at Daytona. Perfectly fine. Give yourself that gap. Get yourself started early. Go out, maybe look at other places, other stadiums or whatever to go and run the race, and then maybe make it some sort of traveling deal. But I don't see the long term viability of it, even if Auto Club Speedway, which is a piece of news that came out, doesn't sound like they're going to be able to reconfigure the track in a year and whatever, essentially 2 years, because after their race in a few weeks' time, essentially in a month's time, they'll have a year and 9 months, and they can't get the track reconfigured, but other places can be reconfigured in a matter of months. I find that questionable. But they want to make if they make this a points race, it'll be an absolute disaster. Because there would be no rhyme or reason to it. You're putting 36 cars out there versus 27, which is still too many. They probably need to go further and limit more cars for making the main event. Now that the reason they don't want to do that is because there'll be some big name that actually misses a show. Well, there was people that missed the show last year. There are guys that were in the race and this year that didn't make it last year, like Ross Chastain, like Alex Bowman, just to name a couple. I mean, the two Roush guys missed the race again because their cars are shit. I mean, and all the crap cars went out. Uh, so in this case, I really don't know what to think about that race yesterday, other than it just is what it is, an exhibition. Um, I will bring up the fact that Ryan Preece came from 16th, was leading the race, led a good portion of the race right after Bubba. He took the lead from Bubba Wallace. Basically, from after Bubba went and got into Denny and moved him in turn one on lap 43. It was three guys led the race, but it was really Bubba and Ryan Preece dominated. Uh, but the amount of cautions, the inability to go and get a run going, average speed of 21.8 miles an hour, which speaks to how many damn cautions they had. I wish they would have actually taken a rolling tally of how many laps they ran under yellow to tell us how many they might have ran nearly 2/3 of the race under yellow. But the two drivers that really stood out, Priest in his first run in the 41 car, Josh, with Chad Johnston of all people coming back to SHR to be his crew chief. That combination looked to have the right idea. I mean, of course, Ryan Priest last year took a Rick Ware racing with Stewart Haas support, Mustang, and made the main event too. So, I mean, it wasn't that shock. He had a couple, 2, 3 really good runs for Rick Ware last year. So it's not all that surprising. The guy is a modified champion. He's run TQs. He's run all kinds of stuff up here in the Northeast. It makes sense that he was able to do the work he did, but he hasn't shown it in a cup car. But this is his opportunity. Tony was up in the booth. Didn't really say anything, but I know he felt really good about that choice. I posted a tweet and got some actual feedback regarding Priest. And I mean, Bubba also did a good job. He was up there. I've been saying for a while that married Darrell Walsh Jr. is in a great state of mind, and he feels free. He feels like he's gonna have that opportunity to take that step, the step that he's been hoping for in his entire NASCAR career, between having the support, the sponsorship support, having the team, having the right crew chief, having a teammate in Tyler Reddick that's going to push him to be better all the time and is a real talent too, really a talented guy. And then you have Kurt still there as kind of the mentor, team driver, coach, manager ish guy. And Kurt and Bubba got along great. So I think there's a lot of good things coming from the 2311 camp in general. Uh, while there's a lot of flux and a lot of stuff going on at Joe Gibbs Racing with some of their drivers, and bringing in Keebler to replace Kyle. So there's a whole bunch of stuff with that. You have Hamlin, who's getting older and might be getting to the point where he may want to move forward elsewhere. Martin Truex may or may not have a job at Joe Gibbs Racing after this year. Uh, Christopher Bell may not have a job because he doesn't want to. He wants to be a dirt racer too because that's what he's a talented USAC midget, and he drives wing sprint cars. And there are owners that would be a little more receptive to that, like Tony Stewart, um, who may have who may have one at least one car is open, the four car, and as many as three, depending on what Al Mirola decides to do, because he decided to go from I'm going to retire to unretire, and then the 41 may or may not be in play depending on what Cole Custer does in the Xfinity series. It might mean that the four car goes to Priest. It might mean that Christopher Bell goes there, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of moving parts, and Stuart Haas has missed out on some people. That would be the whale that Tony Stewart has been wanting to get in his team, a USAC based driver in his organization. And all that development time and all that effort and energy that Toyota put into Christopher Bell, the irony there would be that he would go to drive a Ford would be hilarious to me. But there's plenty of months to go before we may even get to that point. But I'll go through the rest of the field. Justin Haley qualified on pole as I mentioned, but had a rough heat race, but he still started ninth, so he finished third in his heat. Kevin Harvick from 18th, he finished 12th. Christopher Bell, as I mentioned, Noah Gagson, Chase Briscoe started seventh. Had an okay car early and then got in a couple incidents there. Defending race winner and defending series champion Joey Logano, Ryan Blaney, Eric Almirola, Daniel Suarez, and AJ Allmendinger, who sat there and raged the whole entire weekend. And probably was a big part of why Chase Briscoe's car wasn't as good as it could have been. William Clyde Elliott the second having to go to the last chance qualifier. He didn't really do much anything. Finished 21st after starting 22nd. Mentioned Bubba Walls. He finished 22nd after leading the second most laps. Josh mentioned the front row motorsports duo of Todd Gilliland and Michael McDowell running out of fuel. And Austin Cindric, who needed the promoter's option provisional, being the highest ranked points highest ranked person in the 2022 points that hadn't already made the main event. So he got in and then blew an engine, it says. And then Keebler Gibbs got into a wreck or two and broke the suspension. And Eric Jones, even well before that, he basically had to sit there for an hour and a half. Got wrecked 16 laps into the race with Michael McDowell and hit the four car, I think, in the back and broke the toe link on the right rear corner. So it was not a good night for Eric Jones, the legacy motor club or whatever, even though his teammate finished 14th. Um, Jimmy Johnson was up in the booth and he's like, "Oh, that's my car." That was such a great reaction. Can you know, like, oh, it's his first race as an owner. He's like, "Oh, that's my car," and he's already doing the math in his mind there. But did you see anything that really stood out to you in terms of in terms of how some of these teams showed up? I would say that, I mean, for whatever, for better or worse, I think Kyle Busch. I knew he was motivated, and I think Kyle Busch has a real chip on wanting to go out there and prove a lot of people wrong. And he drove like that yesterday. He looked like the Kyle Busch of old, meaning like a few years ago when he won his last championship, meaning 4 years ago. Was aggressive. The Dylan car might have been slightly better. Of course, Dylan had no problem running over people. And but I think Kyle Busch was one person that really stood out to me, Josh. I mentioned Priest and Bubba Wallace, Justin Haley, um, keeping his calm and keeping his cool while his dad went nuts and raged the whole entire weekend. That was a piece there. You look at their potential to be colleague racing, to raise their level to go to where Trackhouse did last year after they're in their second year of existence. So now colleague in their second full year as a cup effort. Can they do that? Can Justin Haley take that next step? Other than that, I mean, you'd mentioned stuff with the Fords. I think Briscoe, Logano, Blaney, and Almirola, at least two of those guys probably could have finished in the top 10 if things had ran, if they had, fallen, the pieces fell into place. Briscoe ran well in that race last year and broke. I mean, I think he had a drive shaft issue last year. And then Almirola didn't even make the show last year. Uh, what's his name? Logano won it. He struggled this year for pace. And Blaney had good pace, but I think he got absolutely demolished, I think 3 or 4 times during the day yesterday. That was something. I think the Fords have more speed than what the results may show. I think the Toyotas have speed and they have potential. At least the veteran presence guys in Hamlin and Martin Truex. Christopher Bell, I know, wants to go out there and show that he can get better than finishing third in points like he did last year. Uh, and then of course 2311 I think is in a very good spot. But those are a few people that stood out to me. Do you agree on some of those, or is there somebody else that we should look at as we have a week and a half before Daytona 500 qualifying?
I mean, I think I agree with you on a lot of those, especially in qualifying trim. With colleague racing, Justin Haley. I mean, they did well in this race last year on speed. And they were up there fighting, for the win until they got taken out by Kyle Larson. But um, I think uh, Justin Haley, he's got a lot to prove this year. Uh, if he wants to stay in that 31 car, AJ Allmendinger also has a lot to prove. Given that he has to justify being in the seat after being on the sidelines over in Xfinity the last couple of years. Um, so yeah, I mean proven his way into the seat. Now he's got to be able to prove his way that he can keep his in the 16 car. But I think they both had a really good qualifying run. So I think that stood out to me. Like I said earlier, yeah, I think some of these guys that weren't as competitive, but they were trying to fight. I think Todd Gilliland. I think even though he didn't finish that well, he was up there trying to fight for a transfer spot in his heat race, uh, and last chance qualifier, and throughout the race he was fighting wherever he was until eventually running out of fuel. Uh, I talked about it earlier, but with Penske, Ryan Blaney didn't really qualify that well. Of course, his qualifying time was disallowed and everything. You saw how he struggled in his qualifying run. So that's a little concerning there. Logano, I mean, for all the talk, about him, potentially repeating in this race, ultimately he was a non-factor. So like I said earlier, that's a little bit concerning, I think, for Penske overall. You know, I think Hendrick, with Alex Bowman, they finished in fourth place, and they qualified pretty well as well. They look like maybe at least on this track they're gonna have a lot of speed. Throughout the season, maybe they'll improve their game. Obviously, Bowman. I mean, we don't know what his situation really is. Seems like Ally is investing in him. Obviously, Ally is investing in the sport. I mean, yeah, they've been really uh bullish on NASCAR the last couple of years. So, I think, they've been able to, put more money into it. So we'll see where they go. But, it looks like maybe Alex Bowman could be a guy that's more than just a randomly win a race here and there kind of guy. We'll see, at least in the Cup Series. Larson uh, didn't really have a ton of speed throughout the weekend, but he was up there when it counted up to fifth. So that's typical, I guess, of Larson being able to go through the field and everything. Even though this is a really tough to pass, but um, yeah, I think some of these other drivers, yeah, like Chase Elliott, like didn't really have much of a chance. I mean, after he got into it uh with Ryan Blaney, he just wasn't really all there that much throughout the race, so he didn't really have much of a chance in the main event, but just didn't really have a whole lot of pace either, because obviously he was fighting for the last spot in his heat race. So, yeah, just a real interesting weekend with some of the guys that we normally would expect to be up there fighting for position versus the guys that maybe weren't as good last year that could be improving this year. So we'll have to see. But I think it's gonna be interesting, compared to last year. We had a lot of volatility in the Cup Series last year with drivers, on a week to week basis, not as consistent as what they normally would be. Now they have a year of data. Can it be more consistent in their results and their driving styles? So we'll have to see if that turns out to be the case, or if we're going to see a little bit more of up and down throughout the year for all these drivers. So I think you're going to see the major players up front, like what we saw on Sunday. Um, but some of the other guys like Logano, can they improve as we get through the first couple of races in the season?
Yeah, and I mean Logano defending his championship and trying to prove that he was worthy. I mean, he won a bunch of races, and in the grand scheme of things, he took advantage of the positions when he had the chance to win. He took advantage of them, and then winning Vegas really set the tone for the championship. And he didn't have a great race yesterday, but I doubt that that's going to be the way it goes for him. I think for Ryan Blaney backing into the playoffs last year and kind of not having a lot to show for it afterwards, it's there's probably a little bit of tension, even though uh he's had a pretty. I mean, he did. I'm sorry. I mean, he did get to the round of eight, so there is some. And he finished fifth in points, or I guess he finished fifth. And then, but Blaney has to take that next step, I think, in his career. He has to close out races. He has to go out there and prove that he can be that other key guy at Penske. to go and win races and possibly win a championship. Gumby is going to be there. Um, he wins Rookie of the Year last year by winning the Daytona 500. He struggled in this race both years. He was a battering ram last year. This year, he needed the promoter's option. Um, he's going to be good on road courses. But I think it's going to be a longer term investment with Cindric because of his youth. I know Blaney is young. I mean, I think relatively, I think you and Blaney are pretty close in age there, Josh. I think so. Uh, he has time,
I
but
think he's like 2 or 3 years older than me, so maybe
okay,
2 years,
yeah.
I think. So
So I mean, Bubba, all them, they're all kind of in that relative range, but you want to see those guys take that step forward because we had announcements. I mean, some of the news from the weekend itself. I mean, or well, first of all, before we move forward into the news for NASCAR at least. Just go and get in yeah the guys that didn't make the show yesterday. The two Roush cars, as I mentioned, the RFK cars again. So that was Brad Keselowski and Chris Buescher. The two Spire cars, Corey LaJoy and Ty Dillon. The two Rick Ware cars of Cody Ware and JJ Ailey. The Live Fast car, which was the slowest car in the whole entire place, BJ McLeod. The two guys that were probably the two that really felt aggrieved the most were Harrison Burton, who got run over or overran a corner, I think, and gave away his transfer spot, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Oh, Richard, going and trying to destroy Clyde, and in the process allowing Kevin Harvick to get past both of them and get into the main. Oh, Richard missing the show, and with the Velveeta Chevy. But of course, JTG Doherty is known for having a good qualifying car at Daytona a few years ago. He qualified outside pole for the Daytona 500. So who knows? Maybe Richard can come back and do something. But that team is not exactly known for great performance. I think they'll be a team ripe for picking up by Toyota or Ford here in the next year. I would think whoever their driver's going to be. Those guys missed the show. A lot of them weren't really that surprising that they missed the show, but and when the Roush RFK team looked exactly the same as they did last year, basically, and you'd think after a year of data and all that, and they've made no changes to where the car was. Brad's car was just as dog crap this year as it was last year. Busher had a little more pace, and he could have possibly gotten the promoter's option if certain things had landed the right way, but unfortunately, he wasn't able to. It wasn't able to get that far down in the points. Cindric got that deal. So some of the announcements during the weekend itself. I mean, Josh mentioned it that Ally is the official bank of NASCAR, uh, along with being the primary sponsor of the 48 car. So, I mean, that's a pretty big deal there. Bring back racing to the city. Yeah, so they'll have the Ally 400, of course, and there's a lot of they're doing a lot in terms of with promotion and activation, and that's of course GM. Like, oh, they were part of the one of the companies that was a part of Ally is what used to be known as GMAC, and other entities or whatever that used to be a part of sponsorship back in the day. So that's a piece of news, big news, a big company uh, increasing their footprint in NASCAR. There was talk about, of course, Auto Club Speedway. They're not going to be. After their race here in a few weeks' time, they're going to be closed to reconfigure, supposedly to a half mile, and they don't know how long it's going to take. The more I hear and the more I see, the more I feel like it's going to end up like Riverside, and be closed than them being around anymore, because they had no problem making Phoenix into a shithole in a few months. They didn't have a problem, ruining other tracks. Atlanta had no problem making their track into a slot car track. Uh, there's other places that have been reconfigured. Texas, of course, all 7,000 times they reconfigured it, and every one of them has sucked. Like these other places can go and redo the tracks, and they paved tracks like Kansas. I think I don't know, maybe they
Well, I
didn't,
mean,
but
Kentucky.
yeah, those that's another SMI. I'm trying to think of ISC or whatever they want to call themselves now, but Michigan, they paved, repaved. Which repave is one thing versus reconfigure. I get that. They re I think Nashville is a SMI
Yeah,
deal. Yeah.
Nashville is SMI now, but
Yeah, and
yeah.
yeah, so I'm trying to think of the tracks in the ISC realm that they were able to kind of do reconfigures or kind of get things done in a timely fashion. Uh, Richmond and they kind of ruined Richmond, and again this one, and well that's in a different circuit there. Uh, yeah, they really outside of repaving Michigan and just ruining Phoenix. I don't think that there's been they haven't really done a whole heck of a lot. I don't know if the Kansas has been repaved or not recently. I feel like they have. They made that stupid road course. Uh Homestead, of course, hasn't been resurfaced in a while. So yeah, ISC I guess is not as versed as SMI in kind of doing reconfigures, maybe, but I also don't buy the timeline that they have unless there's something else going on behind the scenes. And when there's like Kern County Speedway, there's which you basically took the spot of what the old Mesa Marin, not there. I'm not saying it's right there where the old Mesa Marin Speedway was,
Well,
where Kevin Harvick, Ron
yep.
Hornaday Jr., and the like raced over the years. Plenty of the California guys that have moved over to Carolina and made it on in down south or whatever you'd say came from there. Kern County is a track that's viable. Irwindale has been threatened. They've threatened to kill Irwindale for years. They're still open. Irwindale's a perfectly fine racetrack. They held some really good races, big races. The Turkey Night Grand Prix midget race where Tony won his Turkey Night back, what is it, 22 years ago. I mean, you had the Toyota All Star Showdown or whatever there. I mean, that's a viable racetrack, better than racing at the Coliseum. But they don't want to go to either of those places. So I don't know. I don't know, Josh. It kind of stinks to me the way that this whole deal has gone with Auto Club. Uh, and there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of definitive answers either. Which I mean, I feel like it's either going to go the way of Riverside or it'll go the way of Chicagoland,
Well,
where
remember
they basically.
Ontario Speedway also.
Yep, yep, that's another one. They used to hold the final race of the Cup season. They used to run one of the final races of the IndyCar season. They used to hold the World Finals and I think the Winter Nationals for NHRA before they ended up moving to Pomona. So yeah, so there's been a lot of issues trying to keep tracks open in that relative area, but I think it's ISC trying to strong arm or not having a real clue about what they really want to do with the racetrack. I've been of the argument that leave the corners the way they are, grind the front straightaway, grind the back straightaway, go and seal. the front and back straightaways and leave it be. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with the track. I think they need to, if anything, they need to do uh whatever. What was it when Humpy Wheeler said
Oh,
levigating?
levigating.
Yeah, that's what they need to do. Levigate the damn track. They'll all run the high line anyway, or the top two lines. Levigate, and you'll be all right. Like literally, that's what they could do. They could literally just everyone's going to run the top and the top two. You could go and pave the outside of the damn track. The inside will be rough as hell, but that's where the lappers are going to go or something. I don't know. There's got to be a better way than what they're at least putting out there.
Yeah.
Uh,
L
the
let me
other,
put a
yeah,
real add another point to that real quick, but
yeah,
it's land, it's real estate. That's the problem. Yeah, they
yeah,
and
and it's valuable.
yeah, it's valuable land, and also another point, I mean, they've had I mean, I don't know what the numbers are, but I mean, it's not like they're selling out races and, they're obviously taking down stands, doing whatever to manipulate things, and, I mean, look at the Clash, like, that wasn't full. That I mean, it well, I mean, I know they had some issues marketing it properly, but I mean, there was still a lot of empty pockets in the stands for the Clash. So I mean, it still shows. I mean, once the shine wears off, Southern California just isn't that good at promoting races and putting supporting major league racing, at least IndyCar, NASCAR, to that extent. So just it's valuable land, and they have to be able to use it and make a profit on it.
That's true, and they brought that up in regards to there's a lot of talk about redevelopment around there, which is why I brought up the whole Riverside thing. And then you consider, uh, yeah, like bringing up all these different race tracks they've had in that area. I mean, it also you brought up the point about fans, and I think by the time Wiz Khalifa was doing his halftime show, I think there were about I would say like 85, 90% full, but then the lights, it was dark. So to be fair, do we really know what the real attendance was? They also they put it on the ticket for 5 p.m. uh Pacific time, 8 o'clock Eastern time was when the race they put that on the ticket. They didn't bother to say, "Oh, there's heat races, show up for those. There's some concert and whatever." They never said any of that. They said everything starts at 5. And of course, with Los Angeles and the traffic and the way the fans are outside of maybe for the Dodgers, I guess, which I think that's a lie, but um or the Lakers. They don't show up early for these games. They don't support their teams. I mean, of course, the Rams are the greatest example of that. I mean, the Niners go to SoFi and have 70% of the crowd. Every road team that goes to SoFi has more fans than the actual home team. That's the reason why LA didn't have NFL teams for decades. You know what I mean? Like they support the Dodgers because that's the Dodgers. They've been there for a long, long time. The Angels don't draw jack, even though they have two of the best players in baseball. The Lakers suck ass, but they have LeBron James. Then they have a name. I mean, Ballmer's building a new stadium in, uh, I think in what is it called, Inglewood or whatever. I think it's over what it, for. I'm. It has something to do with Jim Dolan because he owns where the Great Western Forum. I think he bought the Great Western Forum and that land. So there's something going on with that. But yeah, they just don't support there. It's fair, very fair weather, and that's part of the problem. IndyCar had a great product there for many years. I mean, like CART did, and even IndyCar had one of the greatest races in recent memory. And but because they ran it in front of about, I don't know, 3,000 people because it was so hot, they've never been back since. I mean, it's just bad overall. But then when you consider IndyCar PR and IndyCar marketing over recent decades. It's not recent years. It's not like they've done a great job anyway. Okay, so the two other things. I mean, Kevin Harvick officially announced that he will join Fox as one of their analysts for the Cup Series, and then he'll also work Xfinity and truck races, dovetailing that along with being the main financial source of Keelan wanting to become a Formula One driver and Piper wanting to do whatever Piper's going to do uh, in her racing career. So that'll be his future. He's great at announcing. I've really enjoyed listening to Harvick, and to be fair, he also has been the lead guy. He's been the play-by-play guy, and during those driver-only broadcasts, he's handled a couple of those bigger roles, and he's done a great job. And I think for the way that Fox presents racing, which is not very good, they finally bring some credibility to their broadcast again. You bring somebody who is a Hall of Famer to be. You bring somebody who is I arguably one of the best drivers of his generation. A guy who's won every big race in NASCAR. One championship, probably could make a case for multiple championships, but one official championship, a stabilizing force at Stewart Haas Racing, and him and Rodney Childers will go down as one of the best combos in NASCAR Cup history. But his knowledge, being an owner, former owner, he understands a business. He understands being a driver. He understands being brash and young, doing stupid stuff. But then he also has become the elder statesman, been a veteran, and somebody who has been a mentor of sorts. So he understands the sport from every angle. And then considering how he had to come into this sport too. And then if you want to have the drunken carnival barker in Clint Boyer, you can have that. Him and Michael Waltrip can go and do each other on this stupid grid. I mean, that's one thing they need to do. They just need to get rid of Michael Waltrip, but they won't. He is an abomination. On top of being a closet fruit, but the thing is, he adds absolutely nothing. Uh, I mean, they got rid of Vince Welsh, but they should get rid of like Jamie Little too. And there's plenty of female announcers that actually have a clue. I think they're trying to do that with Amanda Busick, who's been on the NHRA and kind of started to dovetail or going to all different types of series. Now she's going to be covering NASCAR. They've had Josh Sims on the upswing. Now he's going to be a part of the NASCAR Cup broadcast on pit road. So offending segments of the NASCAR fan base, of course, because they can't deal with a colored guy being on the racetrack, let alone a black guy announcing. So that'll be great. Um, but Kevin Harvick at least brings credibility, stability. Mike Joy and him, I think, are going to get along great. It'll be a different dynamic from Mike Joy's past with the likes of Buddy Baker and Neil Bonnet. I kind of feel like Kevin Harvick could kind of be a balance of a Neil Bonnet and Ned Jarrett. I think that would be a little bit, but he has a dry sense of humor. So I figure that could also be a good piece. But we'll see. It's a good announcement, big deal to at least give Fox, even though they don't do a really good job of presenting the races and they have a lot of gimmicks and goofiness, you have at least one announcer people will respect. And Jimmy Johnson uh, basically explained that he just didn't have it when he drove IndyCar. And I would venture to say when you're 40 plus years old, you have a wife and two kids, and you've won 7 cup championships. The notion of going and taking a ride, taking an airplane ride in a freaking IndyCar is probably not the most ideal scenario to end your career. Also, crashing in an IndyCar at high speed is not ideal. Of course, crashing in a Gen 7 car is not ideal either, but uh, he said just to be on the road courses, he really wasn't able to get it. And it's a different animal. It's why Scott Dixon is who he is. It's why Will Power and Joseph Newgarden and et cetera, Pato Award and Colton Herta. There's a reason why they are at the level they are, and a lot of them, it's youth, and they came up in that. So, I mean, I give the candor, respect the candor and the humbleness and knowing that, yeah, I just didn't have it. But he was pretty solid in sports cars, driving the prototypes. And now I think with the GTP deal, at least this year, he's not going to run GTP. But if he decides that he wants to go move abroad, let's just say, or go race abroad, run World Endurance Championship, I figure there's going to be an opportunity with Cadillac to do that, since he has that connection, and he also had connection with Honda at Ganassi, so Acura could be an option too. And of course, he's running Garage 56. But on that, he also announced that he's going to run the Chicago Street Race, along with, of course, trying to attempt to make the Daytona 500 and this next week. So that's a second race he announced. He doesn't know how many he's going to do. Tony asked him, and he said between 5 and 10 races. Also going to do the Garage 56 deal as I mentioned. So interested to see what seven time will do as a third driver, third car at the Legacy Motor Club, formerly known as Petty GMS Racing. So in a number 84 car. Uh, yeah, those were the news items of the weekend. I know that there's a couple of news items. The matriarch of the Jarrett family, Miss Martha Jarrett, passed away, announced by her son, Dale Jarrett, the NASCAR Hall of Famer, and, you know, 1999 Winston Cup champion and longtime announcer after getting out of the seat, and somebody who's well respected in the garage area, taking on that kind of mantle that his father, Ned Jarrett, carried in the garage area. Ned and Martha had been married for or they spent 67 years together. I'm not sure if all of that was they were married for all 67, but the fact is they were spent virtually their whole entire lives together. So it's a sad loss, and I'm sure for gentleman Ned, a tough time for the whole entire family. They're DJs, one of three siblings, of course, so a lot of grandchildren, a big family there, and a matriarch. I think I consider some of the great women of the sport. I think Miss Linda Petty was such a integral person and a big part of what helped the king go and do what he was able to do. Martha Jarrett the same way, Martha Earnhardt in the way that she was able to go and not only have a husband in Ralph, but go and raise one of the greatest race car drivers ever lived. And now, I mean, she's the only one that's still with us, Mamaw, as Junebug calls her. And that's a good thing for him is that he has his daughters, and they know her and they have that connection. So that's a good thing. And there's other ladies I am over the years that other these the wives of these great racers that have played an integral part. But I think of those three women, and the sacrifices they had to make with their families at the time of the early days of NASCAR, um, for their their husbands to go out. I mean, Judy Allison's another one, and the sacrifices and more than sacrifices she had to make, the sacrifices of losing her children in one in a racing accident, one in a helicopter crash, and her husband getting severely injured in a racing accident. It's beyond, you know, any, like, you can't even think about that. It's crazy. But those are just a few examples, and prayers to the Jarrett family, prayers to gentleman Ned, and to DJ and uh, the whole entire Jarrett family and extended family there. Uh, we will turn it around. I guess this will be the last piece on the NASCAR side, Josh. Came out today that Kyle Busch had a 38 in his luggage going to Cancun, Mexico.
No, he's leaving Cancun and
Oh, he was
yeah,
leaving. Okay,
coming
yeah,
back to the United States.
yeah, and it says here hollow tip ammunition in his luggage. He was quickly arrested following discovery and eventually sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. Uh, that would have been the way for him to lose his ride. I gotta say, if Gibbs at least had used that as the reason for why he didn't wanna keep uh, Kyle Busch, it would be more credible than the excuses he came up with. Other than the fact he wanted to put his Keebler Elf grandson in the 18 car. It's like, oh yeah, the guy was carrying a firearm and got caught, and he got arrested, and he's going to the pokey for 3.5 years. But this is yet another example of where Kyle Busch has learned from his brother Kurt. Uh, you know the that sheriff Joe Arpaio bullshit, who is a inbred dipshit Nazi type who thinks he's like God. And Kurt was in a bad place at Roush and all that, and he mouthed off to him, and he lost his ride essentially because of it. In this case, Kaya learned. Of course, he also has plenty of money, and that 3.5 year sentence all of a sudden disappeared. It's something that also seems to happen in other countries, like India. So I'm not surprised that old Kyle Busch was able to pay his way out. Now all the jokes that have come out about why Richard Childress decided to sign Kyle Busch and get rid of Tyler Reddick. Kyle Busch likes to go and carry brandish firearms and thinks he's some sort of shooter, while Tyler Reddick isn't exactly known for hunting or whatever. I think he seems like a fishing kind of guy, but he's also outspoken and actually cares about progress instead of living in 1842 like Richard Childress seemingly wants it to go to. Um, so yeah, that was interesting. So let's see. Upon searching that there was in fact unlicensed firearm magazine loaded. Dirk, yeah, arrested Bush.
With hollow points, he said.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then he goes late January, Sam. So this is the Kyle Busch statement from his Twitter. So he's blocked plenty of us. So at least it's on Jayski. Late January, Samantha and I enjoyed a several day vacation in Mexico. When departing the country, my handgun was flagged during routine screening at the airport. I have a valid concealed carry permit from my local authority and adhere to all handgun laws, but I made a mistake by forgetting it was in my bag. Recovery of the handgun led to my detainment while the situation was resolved. Not aware of Mexican law and had no intention of bringing a handgun into Mexico. When it was discovered, I fully cooperated with the authorities, accepted the penalties, and returned to North Carolina. Apologize for my mistake and appreciate the respect shown by all parties as we resolve the matter. My family and I consider this issue closed. Bob Pockrass followed that up by saying NASCAR policy is drivers and team members must make sanctioning body aware of any arrests within 72 hours or prior to the next event if it's sooner. Bush did make NASCAR aware of detainment for having a gun in his bag in Mexico, does not face any discipline from NASCAR. And in the process, every gun manufacturer or company that hasn't been involved in NASCAR will all of a sudden end up on the 8 car because old Kyle Busch forgot that he had a gun, which is great. That's a great move. Oh, I forgot. I like that. That seems to be a common theme in certain segments of our society. I forget. I do not recall. Is their usual
Yeah.
response?
Yeah, hey, if they coming for my 9 mil and my AR-15, I'm just gonna say, yeah, I forgot it. I lost it in my boating accident the other night.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
that's how it's gonna go. Um,
I've got
yeah,
I wanted to go and go full inbred moron Kyle Rittenhouse with bunch of assault rifles, and I'm gonna go, oh, I forgot that they were there and that I have all kinds of ammunition, and I'm just gonna go and knock a bunch of people off like I'm playing some video game. Oh, I forgot it. Oh,
Yeah.
get the fuck out of here. I mean, Kyle Busch is at a different level in certain ways and his arrogance and whatever, but that's just that's just really stupid and really convenient. And I mean he drives for the right owner if he was gonna go and try to pull a stunt like that, to be fair. The only other owner I could figure he could get away with it and it wouldn't be that big of a deal. No, he couldn't do it at Hendrick. He probably could do it at Stewart Haas.
Tony
But
would
they
be
never
like, "Yeah,
called him.
that's okay." Yeah. Tony
Yeah,
would
as long
forgive
as
him.
he didn't as long as he didn't Plexico burst himself, I think he would have been alright with it.
Yeah.
You know, the yeah, other than Childress, I don't think Colleague would have cared really. Uh, I don't think, Justin Marks would have been a had an issue with it. I think he got fired by Hendrick anyway, so he was never going back there, and
Yeah.
he got fired by Gibbs essentially too. So those were the 2 places where you'd had a problem. Wouldn't have Penske's another one, but he'd never go to Penske because he hates Joey Logano. Um, so the only 3 places I think it would have been a problem, he's not in the mix for any of those places, so I think there's gonna be more as, this goes along as much as, uh, Kyle may want it to go away. I have a hard time believing it's gonna go away, since he does own his own race team in the truck series. He does have a super late model building, deal there with, a lot of these teams. He builds other cars and chassis, so it's not going away.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter that he drives for Richard Childress Racing. It speaks to a greater issue, and I mean, I'm not going to go off on some tangent and try to be like whatever Second Amendment. You're taking my rights away from the gun. No, there's responsible ways to handle a firearm. There's also a way to actually be educated and show that you're educated about having a firearm instead of acting like you need to have all this ammunition and walk around like a howdy doody, wearing stupid straps around your like 1984
Yeah.
shorts
I'm all
and
for it, man.
yeah, so, walking around like a dumbass and, "Oh, I need to carry it to make up for the fact I got a 1 incher." I mean, it's the same way as they all buy their trucks and they lift them up too. I mean, it all kind of fits. Um, we'll just put all the stereotypes together. Let's just go and do it. If we're gonna do it, we might as well own it. So I'm waiting for Kyle Busch to have his, lifted, Chevy Silverado, and the sunglasses, in his, what do you call, profile picture, inside of his truck. Just really own it. Just really own go. I mean, I know he's a heel. Let's really go the whole way. If you can forget you have a gun, then it might explain why the hell they had issues making a kid. But if you can't don't know where your gun is, I guess he didn't know where the unit was either, or wasn't able to. He was shooting blanks or something. If we're gonna talk about bullets, uh, there's way too many jokes I can make about
Well,
that, and it'll probably get
I mean,
ridiculous.
look at it this way. I mean, he went from being the candy man to being the weed guy, legal weed guy,
Yeah,
gambling, and now he's got guns. So all three of the vices. So you're a Kyle Busch fan, you taking a ride with all the, I guess, all the vices or whatever. So yeah, I mean, no, what
I
more can
just
you
he
say than
just
that?
needs you porn. He just needs you porn or one of these porn websites or whatever, and that would be the last one. He doesn't have a alcoholic beverage if he unless he goes rowdy energy becomes alcoholic
So
beverage.
he just turns rowdy energy into the new Four Loco.
Yeah. Yeah. That would fit the fan base too. There'd be so many of them idiots drinking that crap, and they'd be so wasted, they would be throwing up all over the place. They wouldn't even know that the race was going on. Kyle Busch could fly out of the place, they wouldn't know. Perfect. Great marketing there. Great marketing opportunities. If you do use those ideas, Kyle, we will take um, our money up front for those ideas, and I'll definitely take that money up front because I'm poor. Um, all right. So after going off on Kyle Busch and his stupidity, but then it must be like a Bush family characteristic. It has to be. We'll get into the Super Bowl. Uh, Patrick Mahomes, Kansas City Chiefs, third Super Bowl in 4 years, and Philadelphia Eagles back for the first time since 2017 season. That was a pretty interesting game. I don't mind saying I was at that one. So this Super Bowl though, it'll be Glendale, uh, the Andy Ryad Bowl, the team he used to coach and the team he coaches now. Kermit the Frog likely going to win the MVP on Thursday or whatever, whenever the honors is. A second MVP with a chance to win a second Super Bowl. The Philadelphia Eagles coming back. The Kelsey Bowl. So the Kelsey brothers will be both playing in the Super Bowl. And there's other pieces, other storylines there too, Josh. Um, I mean, I'll let you go first in regards to your thoughts and what you think are going to be the keys to determine who will be Super Bowl champion, and then who you're picking and score.
Yeah, I mean it's gonna be a tough matchup. I mean, I'm not really excited about it. It's the Andy Reid Bowl. Considering he's the Chiefs and Eagles coach at multiple points during his career and everything, and Patrick Mahomes back in the Super Bowl. The last 3 out of the 4 years being in the Super Bowl. I mean, whatever, man. He's been really good, of course. So it's gonna be interesting to see how he plays. He's still got the ankle that he got under Jacksonville. And he played, playing against them and suffered the ankle injury. So we'll see how it goes there. He's got the Travis Kelsey and his receivers were banged up in the AFC Championship game, so there's that as well. Chiefs defense is kind of so-so, but I think they're going to be really challenged by Jalen Hurts and the Eagles wide receivers and their rushing attack as well. Yeah, I mean it's going to be an interesting game. I think the Eagles defense is pretty good as well, so they have a pretty big challenge trying to stop Patrick Mahomes and contain him. Do you pressure him early and often? Do you know, back off and drop everybody into coverage and, let him try to run around on his ankle and get him that way? Be interesting to see. So, I think it's going to be an interesting game from all aspects. Uh, I think the strategy between Nick Sirianni and his offense, he's been very kind of a running based attack. They use the dual threat ability of Jalen Hurts. Against the Chiefs defense. I think the Chiefs they're gonna have to really focus on containment there with their defensive line, and their rookie cornerbacks are going to have to be challenged by AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. So you have two really good wide receivers. Plus you have Dallas Goddard, tight end. So it's going to be a really good matchup. Between those guys and the Chiefs secondary, their rookie corners. It's going to be interesting to watch all that play out. Um, it's going to be a tough game, I think. I'm hoping it's a defensive game. Maybe not as boring as the Rams Patriots Super Bowl from 2018 or 2019, but something where both teams struggle to score or get to 20 points. I think it's going to look like that. The uh, Eagles, their offense, they struggled against the 49ers back in the NFC Championship game. And I think, the Chiefs, while their defense, isn't as good as the 49ers defense, I think, they've been able to come up well in big moments. They've got Chris Jones, Manning, or, he's the main guy to look out for in the defensive line. So, I think it's going to be tough on both ends with the defensive lines being able to get pressure and be able to stop the run on both teams. You got Tyler Pacheco, who seemingly can take runs, bounce off tackles, and go 40 yards, like we saw against Jacksonville back in the divisional round. So, I think it's going to be a lot of things to look out for here in this Super Bowl. Me personally, I don't really have a preference or anything like that, but I guess if I had to pick, I'll pick the Eagles because Gardner Minshew's on the Eagles, and I still have my Gardner Minshew shirt from 2019, uh, and I cheer for him, I guess, if he gets in the game somehow. Hopefully it's not a thing where he's relieving him for injury, but just playing garbage time and everything. So, uh, and hopefully, I guess at that point, if he's playing, then the Eagles have a giant lead over the Chiefs. So, we'll see what happens there. So I guess, yeah, I'll pull for the Eagles in that case. I mean, it really is the ghosts of Jacksonville past Super Bowl because Gardner Minshew is the former starter before Trevor Lawrence, and then of course uh, Chad Henne was the starter for off and on, and backing up Blake Bortles from 2014 to 2017. So there's that. I mean, you want to go even further down this pipeline. He was the backup when the Chiefs. He was the backup for the Jaguars when the Eagles won their Super Bowl in 2017. So there's that. The last time Jaguars made the playoffs, the Eagles were in the Super Bowl and won against Tom Brady, which was the Super Bowl that you were at, Phil. So that's pretty good there. So yeah, I guess I'll lean the Eagles' direction. Unfortunately, I'm don't like the Eagles because, I don't really care for their fan base and just don't really care for the Eagles in general as a team. But, at the same time, tired of seeing the Chiefs being propped up, like they're this, team that's seemingly unstoppable. And, I think Patrick Mahomes. I mean, it's like when people hated on Tom Brady for years, um, but just tired of seeing Patrick Mahomes be successful already. So, ready for a change, and I guess we'll have to go with the NFC here.
And what's the score that you're gonna go with?
Yeah, I'll go with the score. I'm gonna go with 27-21 Eagles.
27-21 Eagles. I'll go out and I'll go in front of it. I figure it'll be a 27-24 game, and I am saying that uh, Brother Knight Harrison Butker will kick the game-winning field goal for the Kansas City Chiefs to help Andrew Ryad get a second Super Bowl, uh, beating his old team. Um, I do think at the end of the day, I mean, Josh brought up plenty of good points in terms of what the game's going to be about. It's going to be determined in the trenches. The Philadelphia Eagles offensive line, arguably one of the best, if not the best, in the league, versus Kansas City and their defensive line, Frank Clark, who's playing a defensive player of the year candidate. And yeah, you got that. That's literally the only thing we had right in that one. Uh, I whiffed on both of mine. Um, I'd picked Buffalo and Green Bay, so that didn't work out well. And then Josh did pick the defending Super Bowl champion Rams, but he did have Patrick Mahomes, so 1 out of 4 ain't bad. In terms of the interior, I think that's a big thing. Can they neutralize Frank Clark's pass rush, take away some of that to let Jalen Hurts go and do work? Is Jalen Hurts gonna be mostly playing pocket, or is he gonna be able to do more of the run? The Niner game got away very early, so it wasn't like they really had to do much. They were gifted a lot of short fields in that game as well. They had a couple of long drives, as mentioned last week, in the post-mortem and my anger and frustration. The fan base, of course, still talking shit week after. It's like, dude, you won. And the Niners are dealing with multiple things, that fan base, between just the disappointment of getting there 3 out of 3 years, 3 out of the last 4, to have the catastrophic situation 6 plays into the game, uh, what the game ended up being and how the Niners just didn't seem to have it after winning 12 games in a row and all that. And the Niners are gonna be going to Philly again next this coming season, so that'll be something. They'll also be going to Jacksonville and Pittsburgh. So, Josh and I will have I might have to actually fly down there. I don't think I'll get murdered if I actually went down to Jacksonville to watch a game. I definitely would get murdered if I went to Philly, um, and probably the Giants or any of those places. But I think Jacksonville will be okay. I'm getting the nod from Josh, so I figured, all right. I know with Manny, he's a Pittsburgh diehard. We always joke around about going out to Pittsburgh for a game, and would be an excuse for me to go to Permane Brothers and have one of their legendary sandwiches. Um, get loaded on some of the great beer that's out there in Pittsburgh and mingle with some of the great Pittsburgh Steelers of the day. So the schedule is kind of laid out that way. There's some good matchups for the Niners, but getting back to the Super Bowl, uh, I think the interior battle. I think the Eagles, of course, with Reddick. He's a game changer. How healthy is Patrick Mahomes with that ankle after having extra time to rest? Is he going to have full mobility? Or is he going to be limited? How is Reddick and all these other guys, Fletcher Cox? How are they going to go and neutralize the passing game of the Chiefs and also the running game with Isaiah Pacheco, the rookie from Rutgers, who's more of the downhill bowling ball runner, and then you have Jarek McKinnon, who's the pass catcher. Can they take Travis Kelsey out of the game? Fundamentally, can you take the only tight end that's playable in fantasy football? Can you take Travis Kelsey out of the football game? That is a huge ask, and it really hasn't happened all year. So if Philly can do that, I think it would be a big deal for them, and it might change that. It would change the result for sure. Kansas City has to defend with AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. Those two guys are dynamic playmakers in their own right. The Eagles' running game is underrated in a sense, but they don't always go with it. I think they more like Jalen Hurts doing the running, but their running game is formidable, and there are issues in the defense for Kansas City. I think there are issues in the Eagles' defense too, but when you don't have a quarterback, how the hell are you supposed to expose those? Um, I think in the end it will be a close contest, and brother Knight Harrison Butker will get the kick for to win the game even after some of the yips he had earlier during this postseason and during the regular season. And there was a lot of bad kicking this year in general. So that might go. I mean, it's indoors though, so there's no issue in terms of elements. So if you shank a pot miss a kick, that's all on you. So we'll see what happens with that. 27-24 there. So I'll go and put that in there. Phil's Super Bowl prediction in KC 27, Eagles 24. Obviously, don't have a preference. I don't like the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't like Patrick Mahomes. I don't really care. I mean, Andy Reid is a great coach, but I don't really care for him either, especially after they beat the Niners a few years ago. And then the Eagles, of course, I don't really care. I mean, I respected them, but this year and kind of their behavior, the way they are, and just the fans is just really bad. So I really don't care. I'm not going to a party. I'm not going to do any of that. I really don't give a shit. I'm just getting ready for racing season. I'm looking forward to the 500 coming up next week anyway. So that is what I'm thinking about there. All right, so let's move forward into the latest news, Formula One, we'll start with that. I mean, we've had some launches, car launches. Today was the Williams launch, which they also debuted the presence of Gulf. They also had the Gulf Oil Company with the great liveries and all. They also debuted um, other sponsors, including Michelob Ultra. And so those are two big ones that uh, Williams has brought on. They also have a great placement of a Duracell battery there on the air inlet, so that's a nice detail there that if you pick it up, cool. I mean, the car itself, otherwise, the paint scheme is pretty similar to what it was last year, so that's something. Will the car be better this year than it was last year? You'd hope so. They only scored 8 points. And but yeah, there's definitely pressure for Logan Sargent to pick up on different details and be able to produce early on, even though I doubt that that's really realistic. I think it'll be more second half of the year before that can really come to pass. Alex Albon, I think, will have to carry the load for a while early in the season if the car is ready. James Valls moving over from Mercedes after many years there, uh, taking over, and there's other pieces that are still missing. So they had their livery, or they just brought out their livery, and then Red Bull, of course, a few days ago had their reveal. It was pretty god awful, but they had their reveal, and the big piece or big news was Ford, the connection with Ford. They will be, and they also announced that they will have fan designed liveries for all the U.S. rounds of the World Championship. Ford will be then badging on the Red Bull and AlphaTauri engines. They'll also add hybrid and other aspects. They'll connect with Red Bull powertrains on that. So Ford will return to Formula One for the first time since selling the team to Dietrich Mateschitz back in 2005. So interesting how that all worked out. They'll be back in Formula One as a power unit. I guess they say it'll be a power unit supplier, but really it's just a connection with Red Bull and AlphaTauri. They also the other manufacturers that said that they're um, signed up for signed up as Alpine, which when you look at the Andretti rumored Andretti deal, they'd probably be going with Alpine. Audi, of course, is taking over Sauber. Ferrari's a Ferrari. We'll see who else is around, whether Haas is still around. Of course, they debuted their car, the Money Graham car, and it's mostly black scheme. Honda will be back, and I think that's where a little bit of intrigue is now, since they won't be with Red Bull. Who gets the Honda deal? Do they go back with Williams? Do they somehow or another go back with McLaren? Hard time believing that, but definitely, I think Williams is in play. You'd have to look at Aston Martin, uh, whatever the Stroll F1 team, what they may want to do with that. They could probably make a connection that way. And then, of course, Mercedes is out there too. So, intrigue. I think the big intrigue is Audi going to go and try to supply to somebody else? I don't think so, at least initially. Who is Honda going to go with? And I think that's going to be the biggest piece outside of the factory programs, the more privateer teams. Who's going to get that Honda deal? I think Williams probably stands out the most, which in turn would probably mean they'll get a Japanese driver again, like they did when they got Toyota engines and they had Kazuki Nakajima there with Rosberg years ago. Um, okay. Trying to get into the other news and stuff. I mean, they brought up we're looking at motorsports.com and motorsport.com and Albon brought up F1 drivers are all concerned by F1 FIA clampdown on statements, which is just BS, honestly. It's just a short way of saying we're not going to allow you to actually protest, and speak out about real issues that are existing in our country, which is pretty or in our world, and which is pretty bad, I would have to say. Um, yeah, Red Bull, a lot of Red Bull crap, and yeah, and there's more, I guess, reveals coming up in the next week. So we'll definitely get into those more as they go along. On the IndyCar side, uh, there's um, there's the news from the thermal club test, which saw Hondas have a good time there with Colton Herta on day one and Kyle Kirkwood, his new teammate, on day two. Ericsson also led a test session, so all Hondas there, but the Chevy teams were kind of doing a lot of work behind the scenes to go and compete. We honestly will not know until um, St. Pete, which is basically a month away from now. And of course, Josh probably will be there. You had another piece of news was that IndyCar will not have double points for the Indianapolis 500. And based on recent years, even without the double points, it really wouldn't have made a difference in terms of the overall champion. It might have made a difference with somebody else below that, over the last few years. But I think it's fine that they went back to regular points, and we'll see what comes off with that. There's other pieces of news that came out. Rahal Letterman Lanigan has Eddie Jones moving back to Green Rehal's car. Then when he had his career year back in 2017, Graham Rahal had Eddie Jones on the pit box there. Roman Grosjean is a Lamborghini factory driver. They're going to bring out an LMDH car next year. So he's, of course, wanting to go and run Le Mans and hoping that the IndyCar schedule will allow that to happen. That would be a good idea, I think, for IndyCar, considering how they schedule and how they do things. It may be leaving openings for some of these races, like the Sebring and Le Mans. I think those two are the ones that they really should leave open so they can get some of those drivers involved at those races. But I would also say that they should be collaborating with IMSA in general and trying to make these mega weekends between IMSA and IndyCar. That's beside the point. I don't know. Did you see anything else in regards to Formula One or IndyCar you wanted to bring up there, Josh?
I mean, I didn't really see much else there. I mean, I think those are the major headlines, but I mean, I will say for the Indy 500 going back to uh, single points or non-double points, is pretty interesting change. The last obviously the last couple of years, it seems like it's given a boost to whoever won the Indy 500 for the rest of the year. Obviously, Marcus Ericsson became a brief title contender after winning the Indy 500 this year. We've seen it in the past. With Takuma Sato, I mean, briefly, of course, becoming a contender. I think it matters more if you're already a title contender throughout the year, but it can hurt your um, chances. Obviously, we saw that with Scott Dixon. Maybe if he doesn't. I mean, obviously the speeding penalty withstanding, but maybe if it's not a double points race, maybe it's less of a gap, a deficit to make up the rest of the year, and potentially the championship is a lot closer. So, I mean, there's that. So it seems like it might hurt drivers more than it helps in for the regulars in terms of having the double points. So single points or just regular scoring, however you want to call it, seems like it's a better way to go. And I mean, to be honest, in my opinion, it's a little gimmicky. It is, even though it is points wise, making it the most rewarding race of the year. There is still the I feel like a gimmick with having a double points, and I mean they did the double points for the 500 and the season finale race a couple years ago. So and now they just did the 500, so now it's just back to every race being equally weighted. So I think that's a better change, and think probably lead to a little bit more consistent points battles throughout the year.
Yeah, I agree on that. I mean, the IndyCar points system, once you kind of look at it and see how it's executed, it probably is the most fair points system. And usually, I don't know how many years in a row. I mean, this last year might have been the first year in a while where the championship did not come down to the final race of the season. I mean, yes, willpower had to do work to get. They had to do a couple things. Basically, winning the pole helped him win that championship there, but he had done most of the work prior to that. Usually, the IndyCar Series championship and goes to the final race of the year, so must be doing something right with that. IMSA kind of has a similar one, but their points are kind of wonky. Um, wanted to before I get into the roundup, just wanted to go and round back into some of the coaching stuff and GM stuff. I mean, we knew about Rand Carthon for Tennessee and Nathaniel Hackett for the Jets as offensive coordinator. Joe Woods is going to become the new defensive coordinator for the Saints. Bill O'Brien, he got hired uh, back a week or so ago. Brian Flores is going to be the defensive coordinator for Minnesota Vikings, and Kevin O'Connell. Uh, in his second year, Vic Fangio, of course, highest paid coordinator in the league, going to Miami with Mike McDaniel. LaFleur, Mike LaFleur, going to the Rams to work with McVay, and then Kellen Moore left the Dallas Cowgirls and now is the Chargers offensive coordinator. D'Amico Ryan's officially announced as the head coach and introduced in the whole bit. So, congrats to D'Amico, former defensive coordinator of the Niners, of course. Sean Payton, Denver. Jim Schwartz comes back to Cleveland to work now as a defensive coordinator. And then Ejiro Evero, who was in Denver last year, moves over to Carolina to work under Frank Reich and that new regime. Ryan Nielsen will be the defensive coordinator, uh, moving from New Orleans and go to Atlanta. So there's that. Trying to go and see what else. There's interviews, of course. There's still a lot of interviews for head coach, and Mean GM's already out there, but head coaches are interviewed. And I guess if you're looking at Arizona, it's now more than likely going to be either Lou Anarumo from the Cincinnati Bengals or Brian or Mike Kafka, the offensive coordinator of the Giants, and or I guess what is it? Aaron Glenn is there, Brian Callahan, uh, and then the other ones have kind of are out. Atlanta's done, whatever. Offensive coordinator for Baltimore is an interesting one. Todd Munkin from Georgia seems to be the favorite on that one. Uh, Carolina needs an offensive coordinator still, and they interviewed Jim Bob Cooter, the greatest, one of the greatest names ever. Deuce Staley is another one. Um, so those are just a couple. Cleveland already hired their guy. In Denver, they need a defensive coordinator. Sean Desai I feel like he was hired there, but maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, Houston still they have the head coach, so now they have to go and find coordinators. And I would venture to say that D'Amico Ryans would probably go, and my money would be on Bobby Slowick, the passing game coordinator for the Niners, would be the guy there. But we'll see what happens with that. Chargers hired their offensive coordinator, so did the Rams, Dolphins offensive coordinator Bill O'Brien for New England, Joe Woods, Jets did that. Uh, high high likelihood that the 49ers are going to hire either they're going to hire Steve Wilkes, who was passed over for the Panthers job, former Arizona Cardinals head coach, and was the interim in Carolina. Um, it's either going to be Wilkes or I think they're going to go from within. That's really what it would be there. Offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay will be interesting. Uh, for some, I mean, I really don't know. I think Ronald Curry, the former North Carolina two sport athlete, would be a cool hire there. Clint Kubiak, after that disaster that was the Broncos offense, uh, can he go and get another opportunity to be seen? There's a lot of talk about Eric Bieniemy moving on from Kansas City. But depending on what happens on Sunday, if Andy Reid decides to call it quits, why would Eric Bieniemy leave? I would venture to say that that's likely going to go to him because it would get the seal of approval from Mahomes immediately, and Kansas City would get ahead of it and actually have a diverse hire for somebody who's been there and been a loyal soldier. But he's got opportunities in Indianapolis. He's got offer for the head coach. He's got offensive coordinator opportunities in Tennessee, Washington. So those are all, yeah. I think those are. I mean, Indianapolis, of course, the head coaching deal. Uh, Brian Callahan and Rich Bisaccia, Aaron Glenn, Kafka, Wink Martindale, Raheem Morris, Jeff Saturday, Shane Steichen, Bubba Ventrone. That also sounds like Indianapolis and Jim Irsay might double down and stay with Jeff Saturday for whatever that's worth. All right, let's move forward into the GSP roundup. Formula E will be coming back this week. They'll be racing in Hyderabad. First Indian, as I said, first Indian round of Formula E championship ever. But then they'll also have first Indian round. I talked about Nicky Hayden. He won at Malaysia, not India. So yeah, I'm trying to see. They don't have F1, F2, F3, but they don't have Formula E. So that's not great. List of all series, open wheel. There you go. They didn't bring that up. It's just open wheel news, open wheel news. That's F2. Unless they just basically got rid of a lot of this stuff. So I guess I'm going to have to go over here. Formula, they'll be Formula E. They're racing, of course, it'll be one race this weekend in Hyderabad. And that's times displayed. So the actual qualifying will be at 12 midnight, 12:10, and till 1:25, and the actual race will be at 4:30 in the morning till 6 if you're East Coast time. Uh, Free practice 2. Could actually see FP2. Green Co. Hyderabad E Pre. And then they'll have 2 weeks off and they'll go to Cape Town, South Africa. And then they'll have a month off between that round and then the round in Sao Paulo in Brazil. And the points standings as of now, Pascal Verline leads after winning the last two races by 6 points over round one winner in Mexico, Jake Dennis, Verline for Tag Heuer Porsche, Jake Dennis for Avalanche Andretti. Their who their power unit is. Uh, yep, Avalanche Andretti. They don't show who they're. Yeah, they're a Porsche. They're also a Porsche power unit team, so that's interesting how that works. They're 2 points ahead of Porsche in the constructor standings or team standings. Um, Sebastian Buemi for Envision is third. He is 37 points back early on. The former champion of the series, Sam Bird for Jaguar TCS Racing, is fourth. The McLaren teammates of Jake Hughes and Rene Rast are fifth and sixth. The BMW powered uh, powered cars, and then Luca de Grassi for Mahindra only scored. He scored the one podium at Mexico. Andre Lauderer 14 points so far as he's in eighth. Mitch Evans for Jaguar TCS in ninth. Nick Cassidy, who's going to get a IndyCar test with Ganassi soon enough, will is in 10th and for Envision. So we'll see what happens there. Um, yeah, full season grid. There are, so I'm trying to see how many. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven drivers who have not scored a point so far this year. That's who is that? Nico Muller. Okay. Oliver Rowland for Mahindra. Norman Nato for Nissan. Maxi Gunther, who I don't know what he's for. Oh, no, it's Roddy. Okay. And then Dick Tantrum, the defending world champion Stoffel Van Dorn, is tied with Dan Ticktum with 1 point so far in the season. So brutal start to the year for Stoffel Van Dorn. So interesting to see what he can do. And Antonio Felix da Costa, Jean Eric Verne, just to name a few guys that definitely need to start making a move with Verline and Dennis having such a huge lead in the standings early on. Um, they have that. Apt Cupra is a team powered by the Mahindra, and then you have what Envision Racing. Who are they powered by? Jaguar. Okay, Envision Jaguar, and then of course Jaguar TCS. Maserati is Maserati, whatever they're. Um, yeah, the Maserati, and then Neom, McLaren's, oh, Nissan, my fault, not BMW, Nissan, my mistake. They're there along with the former EDAMS team. Now it's just Nissan Formula E. The Neo 333 effort is there, have their own power unit. So there is that. We'll recap that next week on the GSP. We'll get into the World Rally Championship, uh, WRC. So there's Ford is they with even with the announcement of their going and competing in Formula One, they're going to stay in World Rally, so that's great. Tanak won an offline uh, prep race for Ford and their new Puma, and also other teams racing in around the world in terms of cold and snow events. So as their prep relative for Rally Sweden and Boss Latvala. Oh, Yarimati Latvala plotting a return. Rally USA, a potential contender to join WRC in 2024. That'd be great. Um, they haven't had a rally in the United States since 1988. the Olympus Rally. So that would be huge. Mickey Bieson was the winner for Lancia. That's long, long time ago. Like a gravel base. Yeah, I would think so. I mean, there are pavement events, but a lot of the rallies, like Travis Pastrana said, he's not going to run full time rallying this year. But there are most of the rallies that are in that championship, I think, are dirt and gravel based. Uh, I think that would be a huge deal, especially with Ford being involved. So, not being Middle East, or so go and check that out. As the year goes on, the standings so far after one round, Ogier, of course, won at Monte Carlo, but won't be running the full championship. Defending world champion Cali Rovampera is second, Thierry Neuville is third, Efren Evans fourth, Otanek fifth. Takamoto Katsuda is going to be running the third Toyota, so we'll see if he can move up. Esapeka Lappi is behind Danny Sordo. Those are driver standings, and then Toyota has what is it, a 20 24 or 20 yeah, 24-point gap, Toyota over Hyundai. So we'll recap both those things next week on the GSP. Josh, let us know what's going on in the world of Sims and iRacing and the like in your Sim segment.
Yeah, of course. Sim segment this week. We'll start off saying, I don't know if I'll do it, but the iRacing Bathurst 12 hours special event is this weekend. Should be interesting. I've never raced Bathurst actually in iRacing, but it's their 12-hour endurance race. Which I've never done iRacing for 12 hours, although I'm sure you'd be on a team, but I've never competed in an event that was 12 hours long on iRacing, so don't know yet if I'll do that, and especially it's a large time commitment. I don't know what I'm doing yet this weekend, so um, yeah, there's that's on this weekend. It should be a good event for sim racing, of course, but the usual stuff on iRacing for me. Uh, you know, Mazda Miatas competing at Summit Point Raceway. Always a good small event there. Uh, let's see, Street Stocks competing at Auto Club Speedway. So that's like the basic level of iRacing with the Street Stocks, but competing on Auto Club Speedway. It's a pretty good thing there. You got the IndyCar, so well, they're not IndyCars anymore. They're U.S. Open Wheel C Delara IR18 series at Michigan International Speedway. So gonna be lots of big runs, lots of drafting, all that's good stuff there. Uh, let's see, endurance racing at Charlotte Motor Speedway Oval with the um, you know Toyota GR86 MX5 Ford Mustang FR 500S. So that's a good series being 25-minute event. Good baseline for multi-class endurance or timed racing. You got the Honda Civic Type R at Okayama International Circuit, always a good circuit to race on. Ferrari GT3 also at Summit Point Raceway. Um, NASCAR Legends, so the 87 series is at uh, Charlotte Motor Speedway from 2008. Looks like they're opening the series for the NASCAR iRacing series, Daytona 500, and open and fixed. So that's coming up, next in 2 weeks or 2 weekends from now. So got to start preparing for that because that should be a good one. Hopefully turn out as good as what the Indy 500 turned out for me last year. So should be interesting there. Um, let's see, NASCAR. What's the other NASCAR stuff? Oh yeah, there is no NASCAR regular series because I think they're getting ready for the next year or so in next season for NASCAR. But most of it's there though. Well, the and then the let's see, NASCAR Cup Series is at Daytona International Speedway road course this weekend or this week as they wait to fill out the NASCAR schedule for iRacing. So you got that news from iRacing themselves. Let's see, they had the NASCAR e NASCAR Racing Coca-Cola Racing Cup Series, whatever it's called. Casey Kerwin won that one, which I think yeah, I think he's the driver for the esports driver for 2311. Well, it says here he drives for some team called XSET, so I'm not really up to date on the esports teams there, but he's been around for a bit on iRacing. He's pretty good, so won the Clash at the Coliseum, the NASCAR sports esports event there, so that's pretty good. Um, let's see here. World of Outlaws. I think they've got a series there, official e-racing series on iRacing. Development updates. They're trying to improve the tire model in the dirt racing and on oval racing. So, it's been up and down over the years with the tires on iRacing, with how it's modeled and how it's supposed to perform according to the Sims. So, we'll see if you know, they come out with I think March or June is when they'll have the next tire update for uh the oval track and for uh, dirt oval racing. So should be interesting to see what changes, from what they currently have until then. It's been a bit of a point of emphasis between critics and supporters. Critics saying the tire model doesn't realistically model tire physics correctly and handling physics and doesn't you know run as well as it should, but their supporters say that it's pretty good and that it's fairly realistic. But I mean, you have your critics and you have your people who support, but that's iRacing and everything. So there's that. Trying to find some more sims outside of iRacing. Obviously that's the one that I focus on the most. R Factor, I think I think they had some stuff with R Factor and Automobilista too, and Azeta Corsa. Um, trying to see if there's any news on those, but yeah, I mean the interesting is you have all those different sim software, whether it's iRacing or Azeta Corsa or um, Automobilista 2 or even R Factor 2 to an extent. I mean, different games that you can play, and some of them, I think iRacing has the best of them as far as being able to compete regularly against other people. The others might have more choices as far as cars and graphics and tracks and everything, but I think iRacing has the infrastructure down for sure. So there's that. In other news, apparently motorsport games stock exploded last week, going from like $3 a share to all the way up to $75 a share in pre-market trading on Wednesday, which is pretty shocking, but shows that any stock is short squeeze can happen, and somehow they decide to pick sim racing stock that should not be even listed. So there's that, um, or anything like that. But it's pretty interesting what that how that even happened, but it is what it is. Um, yeah, I mean, I'll be probably doing sim like for iRacing, probably re-racing the IndyCar on Michigan later this week. Try to do some Cup 87 at Charlotte Motor Speedway as well. No idea if I'll do Bathurst, but maybe I might download the track and practice on it for a bit. There's that. And maybe do some other road racing as well. Been focusing a little bit more on that lately, but try to get back in the oval side of things, especially with Daytona 500 coming up. Got to get ready for that one, of course. So yeah, that's it for me. Sim racing this week. Of course, as always, follow on UCLR2 on Switch. Go on there and look at my stuff and look at all my racing, and I'll be sure to try to let people know when I'm streaming, of course, when I actually do. So go there and look, follow, subscribe, whatever, and watch my stuff. So go on there on Twitch TV/UCO2 and watch all my streams. Of course, Twitter at JP Huffine. Uh, go on my Twitter, see all my takes, see all things I have to say about the racing. Got the Super Bowl coming up, so probably say a couple things about that. So go on there and see what I have to say about all my opinions and everything. And of course, follow our YouTube page at uh, Gripshare Podcast and see all our episodes. We have everything up there, so go and watch or listen, do whatever. Support the page, likes, comment, subscribe, and let us know what you think, so we can continue to make the videos. So, yeah, as always, glad to be back on for another week, and we be in the transition from the off season, talking about football, other sports. You're gonna go be talking about racing once again. So full time. So um, ready. As always, the new year. Been saying the last couple weeks, but now slowly trickling in. We had the Rolex last week. We had Clash this week, and now things begin. And we had the Chili Bowl a couple weeks ago as well. So begin to swing back into racing full time. Now we got speed weeks coming up here in uh, you know 10 days or so, and then we'll get back in full swing of NASCAR with all three series, and then soon it'll be IndyCar, and soon it'll be Formula One. So, as always, glad to be able to talk about it with you and everything. So, yeah, that's all I got for tonight.
Absolutely. We do it together. We've done this deal for 155 episodes or whatever, and got many more to come. You can find us. You can find us on Twitter at GripStripPod. You can find the Gripstrip Podcast anywhere you take in podcasts. Uh, so that's pretty easy to find us there. You can find me at Philip G Matthew on Twitter, on Instagram Philip G Matthew 28. You can find the show also on philipgmatthew.com along with our host on Podbean. With that, yeah, I mean I think that's all in regards to previewing and getting in. Of course, Josh mentioned the YouTube page, and yeah, there. I think that's basically it on that end. We'll be back next week for episode 156 of the Gripster podcast to kind of recap the Super Bowl and the end the season as a whole. What and things to start looking at as they go into the off season. We'll get any updates on coaching news or coaching hires. We'll do our previews for the top 3 series of NASCAR. Of course, ARCA will also be racing at Daytona, so I might get that in there. IndyCar F1 and other racing series news. We'll recap Formula E and Rally Sweden. We'll make our Speed Weeks previews and picks for the Craftsman Truck Series, Xfinity Series, and the Daytona 500. Josh's algorithm will make a return for the first time in 2023. And then we'll have a sim segment and close the deal. Would be remiss before I leave today. Credit and congratulations to EJ Tackett for winning the U.S. Open of bowling yesterday over Kyle Troop in a tough match, tough oil pattern at Woodland Bowl. EJ Tackett becomes only the ninth player in PBA Tour history to win the Triple Crown. He's also a Smoke sponsored bowler there, him and Sean Rash. So EJ Tackett gets that victory, gets redemption after last year when he qualified number one as well, and absolutely had a disaster of a final against Anthony Simonson. So EJ Tackett, one of the good guys on tour, one of the most talented players, a 17th tour title. He's only 30 years old. He's won 3 majors. He's we know he's going to the Hall of Fame. So that's a huge deal for him. And there'll be a few weeks till the next PBA event, at least on televised on Fox. It'll be televised online. We'll see what happens with that. Some of the biggest names struggled in this event, but there were Kyle Troop was there. You had why am I forgetting who? I mean, you had EJ Tackett and I think what is it? Simonson was in that. I just have to go and check. Yeah, check it out just to make sure. Yeah, Springfield Classic is coming up this week. It'll be on Bold TV. Yeah, Marshall Kent, or no, that was from the uh play-in match there. They ran off the they ran off the telecast because all the NASCAR fans were so butthurt. I mean, they got butthurt about practice, and so I'm like, why the hell do you care so much to go and uh, watching practice? But whatever. Kyle Troop, Anthony Simonson, and EJ Tackett. So it was a star-studded event for sure. Kyle Troop climbed the ladder, almost was able to get another major. But you'll see, I think those two guys are going to be formidable this whole season. With that, and for Josh, I'm Phil. We'll be back next week for another episode of the Gripster Podcast. We thank you for supporting us. Thank you for, um, uh, promoting whatever. Just let us know what you want to hear, or if you want us to do anything different. We're always open for that. But for Josh, I'm Phil. Take care. God bless. Be good to one another. Take care of one another. And racing season definitely starting. And Daytona 500, one of the my favorite events in period. It's going to be a big one. Interesting Daytona 500 this year more than recently in terms of qualifying, especially. So get into all that next week on the Grip Strip podcast. So for that, take care, God bless, and goodbye.